One of the things we think about when we're bluff catching is, did we give them rope? Did we give them the opportunity to bluff? And I think when we check a street, that kind of opens up the door. When we take all the aggressive action, when we go bet, 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 or raise, bet, bet, that's when people underbluff. When we start to give people a little bit of rope, that's when they do start finding those bluffs. Hands of the week. All right, we're here with Charlie Wilmoth from the Third Man Walking podcast. He's stepping into Gethen's Danish shoes today.
Is Gethen Danish?
He was actually born in Croatia.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Let's talk about a hand from Mariano's perspective on Hustler.
Yeah, so first thing we need to take note of is that the stand-up game is on and that Mariano and Raymond are the last two players remaining in the stand-up game, which means that if either of them wins a hand, the other has to pay out a bounty to all the other players at the table. Like, no one really knows the answers because the stand-up game is so new and because it's so complicated. But what are you thinking when the stand-up game is on?
Opening bigger, 3-betting more linearly, betting thinner for larger sizes, turning down bluff frequency slightly. And then when you do have kind of medium strength or showdown value hands, giving people a lot of rope and not folding.
I think the stand-up game is interesting. It's sort of one of these new wrinkles that's being added to poker that kind of counterbalances the edge that a lot of regs normally have in preflop in particular, in that they can just sort of memorize charts and immediately become break-even type players by following the charts. When you add something like this to the game, that really nullifies some of the edge that certain tighter type players have if they aren't really good about thinking through situations post-flop.
And that's why these games are so good for the game. The stand-up game, the bounty game, the 7-deuce game. They expose what you like to call preflop charts in trench coats, which are just like your bad regs at the table who have memorized a few preflop charts. And when you add all of these wrinkles, all of a sudden you can really see who's capable of thinking on the fly and who has just learned to play 17% of hands preflop.
Stand-up game. It's good. So this is a limp situation. We have a whole bunch of limps heading to the flop. So we get a king 6-4 monotone flop here, and Mariano has flopped a flush. Checks around to him, and he bets a little bit less than half pot. What are your thoughts on the flop here, Mark?
The general way I'm thinking about betting on flops when multi-way, I like choosing a size that is the biggest size where they still raise off strong hands, but still continue with the weakest portions of their range. If you choose a small enough size, people continue with just a bunch of crap that you're just dominating that has zero or no equity and you're going to get value from. And also, people are going to start raising off their 2-pair, their smaller flushes, their sets. So you end up getting the big bet from the strong portion of their range anyway, and you still capture the weak portion of the range, which would never call a big bet themselves.
So Mariano bets fairly small here. Both Raymond and DJ Washburn end up calling. So the turn is the 8 of hearts, so now 4 hearts out there, and this ends up checking through. And I think we should do something interesting here and wait to talk about the turn until after we've talked about the river. So the river is an offsuit jack.
Look at that sweet baby there.
And now Raymond bets 2,500 here into 3,200. What are your thoughts on this bet, Mark?
It's a big bet in terms of size of the pot, but I think that's a little bit less important than what is this bet size mean for the game. Oftentimes in live poker, absolute size is a much stronger indicator of hand strength than relative size of the pot. And since this is a limped pot, I'm not sure this bet is just saying, I have the ace of hearts or nothing, because 2,500, again, not a big bet for the size of this game.
Raymond very well could use this kind of bet sizing with a hand like the jack of hearts or the 10 of hearts. So now that it's back on Mariano, he does something that a lot of people in the chat and in the comments thought was not very good and decides to raise. But I actually think this is a good play.
These are the two remaining players left in the stand-up game, and I think if Raymond does have a heart here, he's not going to want to fold because he's going to think Mariano is full of shit after he checks back the turn. And now something even more interesting happens.
So Raymond now decides to raise again to 18,500. And so now he's saying, I have the ace of hearts. What are you going to do about it? And now I think that Mariano has gotten himself into a bit of a pickle.
I put you in a pickle.
If there was a pickle here, I would climb inside it.
So we've praised his play so far on the river, but there is a problem with this hand, which is what happened on the turn.
By checking back the turn, Mariano's essentially saying, I never have the ace of hearts, because when you're in position and you have the nuts and you are incredibly deep with a high SPR, you just don't want to be checking back the nuts in position at any frequency ever.
Even in just a regular normal poker game under regular normal circumstances, you should not check back the nuts on the turn. That's going to be true 10 times over when you and one of the other players left in the hand are the last two players left in the stand-up game. Like, if you had the ace of hearts, this is such a great spot to make some money, even with 4 hearts out there. And so a problem for Mariano on the river is that he just does not have the ace of hearts anymore. I mean, there's just no earthly reason for him to be trapping the turn. I think that Mariano, in making this raise on the river, is maybe thinking that Raymond just isn't going to 3-bet here without the ace of hearts in his hand, which under slightly different circumstances might be true, but I'm not sure that necessarily actually applies given what happened on the turn.
Is this hand worth a bet on the turn?
Yes. All the reasons why we said that this was a good raise on the river apply to betting the turn. If we think that he can call us when we raise the river with the jack of hearts or the 10 of hearts, well, guess what? He's going to call us with all of those hands on the turn as well.
And not only is he calling with those hands on the turn, he's also calling with all the 2-pair hands on the turn that have outs to boat up that are just never folding.
I mean, it has all those advantages without also removing the ace of hearts from your own range and forcing Raymond, therefore, to play more straightforwardly against you on both the turn and the river.
Can you explain why Raymond would have to play more straightforwardly if Mariano bet the turn and bet the river?
Because if people are worried about you having the ace of hearts, they can't just bluff you freely. Now on the river, Raymond knows with pretty great confidence that Mariano doesn't have that card, and that really changes the way that Raymond can open things up potentially. We talk with our students about having a logical, consistent thread that goes through the hand. I think that what Mariano did here on the river is potentially really good in isolation, but it's inconsistent with what happened on the turn. And I think the hand becomes easier to play and more profitable to play when you just take all the thoughts that led to the river raise and apply them to the turn and play the whole hand that way. Bet the turn and then bet the river also, and then potentially fold when you get raised, and you can do so with a little bit more confidence that you're not getting played.
How often does Raymond play the naked ace of hearts this way?
So he doesn't have the ace of hearts with another heart in his hand. That doesn't make sense based on what happened on the flop, but he certainly could have a hand like ace 3 with the ace of hearts.
Do you think he's limping that hand from +1?
Sure. With the stand-up game on and with him needing to win a hand or risk losing the stand-up game to Mariano, I think he absolutely has a lot of those hands.
Would those hands either ever bet out themselves on the flop or go for a check raise on the flop, just trying to apply max fold equity right now and take down the stand-up game?
I think that's possible, but I don't know if we can assume that all of them would.
All right, let's watch and see what decision Mariano makes on the river, and let's see what Raymond has.
Mariano feeling like this has to be the ace of hearts. He lets it go. What a bluff by Raymond. Whoa. Well deserved.